Hands are so important in sewing. I have watched skilled hands create finely detailed heirloom dresses, and I have watched weathered hands, gnarled and crippled by arthritis, slowly and deliberately smock a garment intended for unseen yet eagerly anticipated little ones. Whether you prefer to stitch by hand or stitch by machine, every project requires that you give it a hand or two. Today, we will challenge your hands to learn new skills and make it easy for them to master new applications of techniques you might already know. By the end of our show, you might be giving yourself a hand for what you have learned to do. The hands on the clock are moving quickly, so let's get started. Welcome to my sewing room. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today my dear friend and business colleague, Sheila McNeeley. Sheila is National Sales Manager for R&K and Floriani. Sheila, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha.
I can't wait to see your adorable project.
I
love it.
Well, thank you. We have a wonderful travel book pillow. And as you can see here, you have a wonderful little pillowcase. And then when you pull out the pages, you have a wonderful book.
I think that is adorable, an alphabet book.
We have so many techniques to show you with this project today.
I can't wait.
We're first going to do applique in the hoop. So what we're going to do is we're going to hoop our stabilizer, a fusible stabilizer that is fusible side facing up. And then we're going to put it on the embroidery machine, and it's going to stitch an outline so that we can get our design placement. Then we're going to remove that and press our applique to the fabric. Then we're going to trim and cut that out. And our next step is we have our beautiful G that we're going to peel and remove the backing so that we have a tacky back to that embroidery.
Okay.
Then we're going to place it over the outline to get a perfect placement every time with our lettering. We finish our embroidery.
I bet I know what you do next.
And then our next step is our finished project. Now, one thing that I want to tell you is when you start to stabilize your fabric before this, you always want to cut your fabric larger than what you want the size to be, because it's going to pull in and draw just a little bit. So when your end result, you can fussy cut it and get it to the size that you want it before adding it to your page. We're going to take
C is for cow. That's very nice.
It is. And if you notice, Martha, this is one of your baby layettes.
That's so cute. One of the baby layettes, a little cow. That is so adorable.
We have our page for our book, and we're going to add that to fusible fleece. The nice thing about the fusible fleece is that when you press it on, it's a permanent bond. So we don't have to sew all over and quilt the piece. We're only going to applique that down. So we're going to use decorative stitching. Once we have our finished piece, then we're going to add our applique piece and use decorative stitches to add this to our page of our book.
That is so cute. And you know what, I think to have that all put in there because we have a pillow. Oh, can you imagine little ones just dragging that around, then all of a sudden you can get it out and read. Thank you so much, Sheila, for sharing that adorable pillow with us today. And next we have a So Quick, So Easy project. Sheila, this is the most adorable idea to use for almost every room in the house. Now tell us what we have here.
Well, we can take any store-bought lampshade and we can do a quick addition to our room to make it match up to the decor and the things that we want in that room. So with this one, I've used home decor fabric with a little bit of trim.
And you just glued all of this down to the lampshade.
I used an applique product and hot glue.
An applique product and hot glue. This is so adorable. Talk about easy. Both of these. This is just a little purchase fabric that you use the applique product to attach it.
It is. It's just with the applique and a little bit of trim that we could turn any little boy's room into, you know, the little dinosaur that they want it to be.
Now, I love machine embroidery, so this is just beautiful.
Isn't it beautiful?
You've done your machine embroidery not just on the front, but on the side and on the back, and then use the applique product to apply that. Talk about an elegant touch for a bedroom or a powder room or just any room where you want a little tiny delicate touch. Well, show us what you did.
Okay, one of the wonderful things we can do is to go to our local craft store and purchase a self-adhesive lampshade. And then when we remove the outer rim, it gives us our template to trace. So we're going to take that to our applique product, and we're going to trace around that to give us the piece that we want. Then from there,
wait, you left a seam allowance, I believe, didn't you?
No, actually,
just traced around.
Just
okay,
traced around.
Okay, okay.
And then we're going to press that to our fabric.
Okay.
So to the wrong side of the fabric, we want to press the fusible side. Then we're going to trim that down to our size that we need. So then all we need to do is to remove our applique, the backing from the applique. So then we can add it to the shade to give it this beautiful decorative look. And then we can add our trims of any nature that we'd like.
Glue those on.
I would just glue those on. Or like this one, I have embroidered little ladybugs and used the stencil burner to burn those out and applique those to the shade. So you can use any kind of an applique to add to them as well.
This is just in the category of so much fun. And Sheila, I love to just have new ways to do machine embroidery for home decorating, for women's clothes, for everything. We're just having fun with our embroidery machines and our applique, aren't we?
Most definitely. It's a lot of fun.
And this is a great idea for a lampshade. As a matter of fact, I have several places I can think that I would like to use this myself. Sheila, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
And now we have some quilting techniques to share with you. I am so pleased to have today my very dear friend Louise Baird as my guest. Louise is a designer and writer, and she's head of quilting education at Martha Pulling Company. Louise, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. I always enjoy being here. During this series, we've had a quilt that we've done several different projects or parts of, but today I wanted to talk about binding a quilt in general, not just this quilt. So I did make a little sample quilt. This is just a sample, and you have your quilt front, you have a backing, and then the binding is around the edges. And I have two different kind of corners that I did. One was a block corner, and another is a mitered corner. So there's different things that you can do, or two different ways. Certainly, when we talk about doing binding, or I'm talking about doing binding, there are lots of ways to do it, not just one way, or my way. Usually, if you do a double binding, you will start out with a strip that is 6 times wider than your actually finished binding. My seam allowance is a 1/2 inch. I start out with a 3-inch strip, fold it in half. That makes 1.5 inches. And then there are the 1.5 inches is what you need for a seam allowance, a turnover, and then a turn back. Okay? you take your binding strips, place them 90 degrees together, and you can either draw a line or you can eyeball it. I tend to have to draw a line. So I draw my line, stitch on the line, and then you trim the excess away, and you press it so that it's now a straight line.
I got you.
With it. Okay, so now you've got your binding. To do a block corner, what you would do is have your quilt sandwich. Usually the backing and the batting are larger than your quilt top so that it sticks out some. Also, you want to follow what your seam allowance tells you. This seam allowance is a 1/2 inch. So I've got a 1/2 inch there, and now I'm going to trim away my excess backing and batting, and then flip the binding to the wrong side. When you flip it to the wrong side, it can be just beyond your first stitching, and then stitch in the ditch like it's done right here, or I've used a blanket stitch, or you can actually stitch it by hand also. And then you sew the other two sides on. Again, you would trim the seam allowance and then turn it to the wrong side. Now you've got to finish this edge. To finish that edge, if you just turn this under before you fold back, it will give you a finished block corner.
Okay.
Okay, now to do a mitered corner, which is generally somewhat neater than a block corner. I think more people like to do a mitered corner than a block corner. Again, you start with your completed quilt top, a batting, and your backing. And again, the backing and the batting are larger than your quilt top usually. For this one, I like to either bisect my corner, like I did here, or I will make a cross in the corner of the quilt top, so the equal distance for the seam allowance. So this is a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so these lines are marked a 1/2 inch in on both ways so that it crosses here. When you do the mitered binding, you will lay your binding down and leave several inches that are unstitched. Begin stitching when the needle hits that bisecting line or the crosshairs. You leave the needle down, pivot, and stitch off of the quilt. Okay, here I've stitched off of the quilt this way, then you fold the binding at a 45-degree angle and then down again and stitch again at your 1/2 inch seam allowance. On this one, I'm ready to do the last edge, so I'm going to turn it up 45 degrees, fold it down so that the fold is even with the quilt top, not the binding, and then I just stitch at the 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now this has been stitched all the way around. I didn't really stitch that, but that certainly could be stitched. To do the edges at an angle, you put the beginning one at a 90 degree down, and the other end at a 90 degree up, and make sure that those folds match. Then you want to open up the folds so that now you have the whole width of your binding. And you're going to have to sew these two pieces together, but you're going to sew it where it is not against the fabric. It's going to be up, and you're going to just sew along that edge. Before you do anything after you sew it, make sure that the finished binding is going to lay nice and flat on your quilt, and then you can trim your seam allowance there in the excess binding, and you're ready to trim away the excess, backing and batting, press the binding up, and fold it to the wrong side. In the miter, you can I'll turn it over here. You can fold this so that it just covers your seam and make a 45-degree angle here, and then fold this to the back and press so that it makes a very nice 45-degree angle here. Generally, most of the time I'll hand stitch it if it looks like it's going to open up, but it's not necessary all the time.
You mean you hand stitch the whole binding, or just the little corner, just that little miter there, Louise?
Now,
okay.
because I have a hard time sewing straight, really. You can either stitch in the ditch or do the blanket hole, buttonhole stitch, but I tend to do that by hand, just because
put your binding in
it's
by
not
hand.
as visible.
Louise, do you do the mitered or the square bindings more often?
I tend to do the mitered more often.
Okay.
It's
Do you
just
think one is
neater.
easier than the other one?
I think the mitered corner is prettier, and once you understand about folding it up 90 degrees and then back down, it's very easy.
It's very easy. Okay, well, I had to ask you that. Louise, thank you so much, as always, for doing a fabulous job. And next, we have some hand embroidery for you. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today my friend Sandy Jenkins from Fredericksburg, Texas. Sandy is a needlework designer as well as a machine embroidery designer. And Sandy, it is just so wonderful to have you with me again today.
Thank you so much, Martha. I love being here and I love to teach, so this is perfect. Today we're going to do a herringbone stitch. A lot of people think of it as crazy quilt, but we did a few extra things with it, and today I brought the models for the tea towels. And if you look at the cow, it has a perfect example of the herringbone stitch in the grass. So we'll look at it for a second and then we'll start the stitch.
It's fancy grass that cow
It
is
is
standing
fancy
in.
grass, absolutely. Okay, we're going to come up, and the herringbone stitch is nothing more than an elongated X, Martha. So you're going to come up, you're going to go down away from it and back up small ways away, and then you're going to come back at the bottom. And if you had lines here to mark at the top and bottom, it would be easier. I don't mark mine, Martha, because most of the time you're using a line that you're embellishing in Crazy Quilt, so you work off that line, but I'm just going to do it freeform today. So you see that every time you're crossing the same direction, that's a really important thing, and it's just an X. So you're going to make an X here with a very little bottom, an X there with a very little top. Now, if you wanted to do 2 rows of this, Martha, you would just come across. You could start even, or you could start exactly opposite. There are lots of ways to, or lots of looks for the herringbone stitch, as we'll discuss in a minute. But you would just connect these points if you wanted to make it even. You'll notice today that I'm using a ribbon instead of a thread. These are really neat threads that we're using, and a little bit dressier for Crazy Quilt, a little satiny look. Okay, so there you go. If you wanted these to be more perfect and pull them up to more the same, you would just wrap or tack each of these little crosses at a point, okay? So that pulls them together. I brought a few models today, and most of these, in fact, all of them, I believe, start with the herringbone stitch. This one, you can see just one single row of herringbone, and then you've done a lazy daisy and a few little beads just for interest, a little more dimension. I'll hand these to you. These are offered as a stitch of the month, which is kind of a fun thing, and lots of the Crazy Quilt girls need a little inspiration. It's hard to think of decorative things. This is 2 rows of Crazy Quilt, French knots in the center, lazy daisy at the top, and a fringe stitch done with silk thread. Little metallic on the base.
I love Crazy Quilt.
It's
Sandy.
really, really
It's
fun.
so happy.
Oh, it is. It's so, and it's so creative. Okay, this is 2 rows, exactly like we learned today, so that if you did the 2 rows with just regular thread, and then you did the lazy daisies connecting in the center, that's a very, very nice, pleasing way to use that stitch. This is a little example of a single with an open fly above it. We've done the open fly here on the shows before. And this one is not real showy because of the colors, but it has a great combination, and it's a very nice subtle stitch. A lot of people don't want to do crazy quilt, Martha, but they want to learn these stitches. People are always amazed by the different stitches. So I created the line of towels, kitchen towels, to let them know that there are other uses for herringbone and the decorative stitches other than crazy quilt.
Well, I'd like for us to look at this little cow one more time with the herringbone and the little flowers, the little roses. I just think that's the cutest cow and the cutest grass ever. And the paisleys on the cow's back.
It is fun.
And it is fun to embroider, wherever you choose to embroider.
Absolutely, and there's
so
no
much
limit,
fun.
Martha. You could put this on the bottom of a dress, on the bottom of a little pillowcase, anything.
Sandy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Martha.
And now won't you come with me to see a piece from my vintage collection? I love baby dresses. I'm sure most of you already know that. This sweet little baby dress is made by hand. It even has the little entredot. Everywhere there's a seam, there's entredot. It has drawn thread work, pin tucks. Let me just look at a few of these details with you. The beautiful little collar, which really is kind of like just a high neck. And it has the drawn thread work, the little released pin tucks, the sweetest little embroidery on the front. And then come down and look at the skirt. Oh, so sweet. The drawn thread work, the padded satin stitch, a little bit of shadow work embroidery, and then hem stitching by machine around the bottom. And by the way, the first hem stitching machines were produced in about 1865. And then some lace, and I'll turn it over for you to see the back, which is also very sweet. Not quite so elaborate as the front, but also very sweet. Okay. This is something very special. I wish I could tell you where I bought it, but honestly, I have forgotten. But it is so pretty. This is a baby blanket or crib cover. It's about the size of a crib. First thing I want to show you is this beautiful peach silk on the back. You know what? I think I got this in France now that I'm thinking about it, because most of the things I've gotten, which were silk, I did buy at the flea market in Paris. But look at the beautiful strips of ecru silk on top, and the most magnificent piece of French lace. Such a wide, beautiful piece. I'd like to show you the ruching all around. We have the ruffle, a peach ruffle, and the ruching, and both the peach and the beige are ruched. But this is what I really, really, really want you to see. The beautiful peach ribbons, just stitched down by hand, and a little bit of curving. And look at this one. This has been curved around and gathered in the middle. It almost looks a little bit like a yo-yo, but it really isn't. But it's gathered in the middle like a yo-yo. And then we have another piece that has been curved around, and all of this beautiful ribbon piece, which it really is ribbon. It is not the peach fabric, but it's very close in color. And all of this has been sewn on the four corners. I can just see the baby's bedroom. You know what the beautiful thing is? A baby's bedroom today would be just as beautiful with this as the focal point. Actually, that is so pretty, it would be pretty in any room. I have a wonderful sewing from the heart for you today from Montana. Dear Martha, we have a volunteer group of women that make baby blankets for the newly baptized, table runners for the newly married, and pillows for landmark anniversaries, 25 years, 50 years, 75 years. The name of our group is Sewing for Life. We pray before we sew and include all the names of the people we have made something for, starting with those events January 2008, and continue praying for them at our weekly sewing meetings. The families receiving them, and our priest loves to hand them out. We are St. Matthew's Parish, Kalispell, Montana. I love all that you do and hope that one day I can come to one of your events. Thank you, Diane Joy. And what I want to read is the PS she added. A few years back, I wrote to you about the baby hats I make for a local hospital. You mentioned my name, and a lovely lady saw it on television and taped it for me and sent it to me. She lives an hour away from me, but it was such a wonderful expression, such a great bond to have with other sewing enthusiasts. Diane, this was such a wonderful letter. Thank you for your group there at St. Matthew's Parish in Kalispell, Montana. And isn't it wonderful that sewing ladies care enough to tape a television series or to tape an event and send it to another one that lives an hour away? Thank you so much for joining me today. I would love to invite you back next time.